Unbroken, the podcast with Madeline Black. Healing through storytelling.
Hello and welcome to Unbroken, the podcast with me, Madeline Black, where I am collecting stories of amazing people that I have met along my journey. Stories of people that have really triumphed after adversity, and they haven't just bounced back in life, they have bounced forward. And today, my guest is Donna, Thistlethwaite. In 2012, Donna jumped 30 meters from an Australian bridge in an attempt to end her life. At the time, she was experiencing career challenges fueled by feelings of self-doubt and worthlessness. Her actions shocked those who knew her and who regarded her as a competent human resource professional and a friendly, enthusiastic person. Donna journeyed from breaking to receiving an Entrepreneur of the Year award in 2016 and found her purpose in career coaching and speaking. She shares her story to help others understand that failure does not need to define us, and that there are strategies that can be successfully used to create a fulfilling and happy life. So welcome, Donna, all the way from Australia. How are you today?
Thanks, Madeline. I'm doing really well, thanks. It's the end of the day here, the tail end of the day.
It's a start.
I know, right? It's amazing that we can do this.
It's brilliant. So the first question I always ask everyone is, what does the word unbroken mean to you?
Oh, I hadn't seen that one coming. Unbroken. I like it. You know, what it means to me is that your adversity hasn't broken you, that you can still be whole, and that we can get through things, get over them, get past them.
You definitely are a testament to that. So before we go back to that day, can you just tell us what life was like for you, just even a week or two before you decided to make the decision to jump off the bridge?
Yeah, sure. So back then I had a little 2-year-old. I'd been back at work about 12 months and I was working part-time. Life was quite busy. I was running my household. And, I was quite happy to be back at work. I really enjoyed work, and career's always been quite important to me. I studied at uni sort of later in life, in my mid-20s, and I really career was part of my identity back then, and I was a pretty happy-go-lucky person. To the outside world seemed like my life was in a great place, and it was. I'd always had these cracks in my psyche, though. I'd always lived with self-doubt. I'd had some childhood trauma that left me always feeling as though I wasn't as good as other people, and I carried that around with me, and it wasn't necessary. People who knew me well knew that was there, but a lot of people didn't.
Yeah, and I get the sense from, you sent me a link to a TV show that there was a little bit of imposter syndrome, that you felt like you weren't doing as good a job as you thought you were, and that, you weren't performing as well as you thought you were, which wasn't the truth, but that was your perception.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had I guess a crisis at work. I was on a new project and I was leading a small team, and it was the first time I'd done that in that organization, first time I'd been a leader for a long time. And I had somebody that was working for me challenge me when I'd asked her to do something, and it happened in a really public environment. So, I don't know what the offices are like over there, but this was one of those really open offices. We call them open plan offices, where everyone can hear everything. And we had quite a loud discussion, and she outrightly refused to do what I'd asked. And what I found was it triggered something for me. It triggered these old feelings of doubt and not being good enough. And I had been leading managers
as well, maybe.
What's that?
I imagine shame as well, being caught, being put down that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I had been coaching managers on how to be better leaders for a long time. I was a human resources professional. And then I just thought, well, who do I think I am? I'm not even any good at this. And so that's sort of this just massive crisis of confidence where I just thought, I'm hopeless. I'm obviously not good at this. Who do I think I am? And then that became the lens through which I interpreted like the interactions that happened in the following couple of weeks. So everything was like just on the negative. I walked away from conversations with thoughts in my head like, oh, she just thinks you're bothering her, or she thinks you should know this. And another one was like, it was like, oh, she knows you're failing. And these are the voices, the stories.
The script, the story running in your mind of
Yes.
not being good enough and
Yep.
and being worthless in the workplace.
Yeah. So it was that all of those stories just were triggered, and yeah, our brains can do that. It just, interprets a situation based on what's going on inside of us, I've found.
Mm-hmm. And up until that point, had you ever felt suicidal before?
I, a couple of times, had a feeling walking over that bridge that I could jump off, but I wasn't suicidal at the time, and I wasn't necessarily going through hard times.
Mm-hmm.
It was a thought that had popped into my head, but I had not actually had other suicidal thoughts or bouts of mental illness.
So these feelings that you had, they were only really a week or two before you decided to take that journey to the bridge on August the 12th. Can you tell us what happened on that day?
Yeah, so I think things really escalated for me on the Friday before the Sunday that I made the attempt. My partner had been away in the preceding week, and things had really escalated at work, and I just decided I didn't want to be there. I couldn't do the job, and everybody knew that I was hopeless. And then when my partner came home, I hadn't told him what was going on because he had never really gone away on a boys trip before. Him and his mate had gone driving in our VW Combi on a road trip, and I didn't want to spoil their trip. And so I was dealing with it all on my own and with my 2-year-old around. And the boss that I had at the time too, she was out of the country for a few weeks. And so those, I guess, supports that would have normally been there weren't. And
you weren't able to share it with anyone how you were feeling?
No, look, in hindsight, there are people I could have reached out to, Madeline, and I really
felt like that at the time.
It felt like that, yeah. And it's hard when you feel like you're failing at something, you don't really want to draw more attention to it, And when my partner came home and I told him what had happened in that week, I just started to feel like I'd messed it all up, that I just couldn't fix it, that they were going to sack me from work, so dismiss me from work. And I thought I'd got myself into such a mess that I just couldn't get out of it. And I started to feel a lot of shame. I felt like I should have been at work. I shouldn't have given up. I've always been somebody that people have commented on my tenacity, and I felt like I'd just given up. I couldn't do it. I felt like my integrity was in question because I should have been at work and I wasn't. And yeah, just all these thoughts were going on in my head, and I thought, I don't know how to fix this situation. And not long before, a few weeks before, I'd actually talked my partner into refinancing our home as well. He had owned a property when we met, and our accountant had suggested that we do some moving some investments or some assets around for a more favorable tax situation. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to get I'm going to lose my job. We're going to lose his townhouse. I'm going to be a terrible role model to my little boy. And I just don't want to be here. I can't. They're better off without me.
Thoughts were building up, and you were layering them, and one layer and then another layer, and it just got too much. And you decided that people would be better off without you, that they wouldn't miss you. You're just a burden.
Yeah. And I thought, well, if they were to have the insurance money, which I don't even think now that they would have even had access to, I thought they would be better off with that than me.
Yeah. And so the bridge is 30, 40 feet above the water.
Meters.
Meters is high. And most people that would jump from that height wouldn't survive.
So there's certainly been a lot of people who have died jumping off that bridge. There's at least 88. Back when I attempted, there had been 88 deaths from the bridge. And the great thing now is that there is this big barrier that stops people from taking that action. And that was one of the happiest days of my life when they announced that barrier had been finished. It was such a relief, because what we know is that access to means when we're struggling puts us at much greater risk. And so if it's a little bit harder for somebody, then there's every chance that they will actually come out the other side of those feelings and, be safe.
Yeah, and I also heard that when you were finally taken out of the water and you were sent to hospital, that one of the nurses said to you that if you had completed suicide, then your son had a 50% higher chance of also attempting suicide. And that seemed to really wake you up. That was a shock.
Absolutely. That took that off the table for me forever. I thought I was helping him, and when I realized that I was potentially cursing him, I just thought, well, that is never, ever, ever going to be my answer again.
And at the time, you kept it quite private. You didn't speak about it publicly, but you made the decision to share your story at an arts festival, at the Noosa Arts Festival. Why did you make that decision to then share something that had been so private?
Yeah, the reason we I guess kept it private was because my son was only 2 years old, and I wanted to be the person who had that conversation with him, and I knew that it would be many years before that was an option. And I was actually at a festival we have here, a folk festival with a bunch of friends, maybe a couple of years later after the bridge. And our friend said, oh, my friend's running this storytelling event. Why don't you come? And we went down and watched it. And I sat there absolutely mesmerized. I had never seen anything like that before. And I just had this feeling in my stomach that I was meant to do that. And when we left the venue, I remember saying to my partner and a friend I was with, oh my gosh, I've got to do that. I haven't had a feeling like this before. I'm meant to do that. And so I went along to a couple of these storytelling events, and I just told stories from my life and nothing to do with the bridge. But what I found was I just felt alive when I shared stories, and I just knew I wanted to do more of that. And the lady who ran the event, she worked for like our national broadcasting service here, the ABC, and she did these events around Australia, and I rang her, and our mutual friend did not even know this information because most of our friends didn't. And I said to Mel, look, I've got this big story in my life, and I feel like it's meant to be shared, but I don't know when or where, or, how that's meant to work. And so, yeah, we just had a really nice chat about it. And then she said, look, let's just sit on it and see what happens. And then a few months later, she rang and asked if I would come and share the story to 80 strangers at this Noosa long weekend festival. And yeah, that's what I did. At first, I had all these reasons coming up that I couldn't do that because it's 200 kilometers away and it was a weeknight, and then I just realized that I absolutely could do that, and so I went there and shared my story, and it was recorded on a podcast series that is that's run by quite a prominent Australian journalist and entertainer, and they played that recording just anonymously. So I agreed to participate as long as my name wasn't mentioned.
Okay.
And yeah, then it just bounced around on that podcast for a few years, and then they later asked to include it in another podcast, and I said, look, you know, it's already out there, that's fine. It was called Tall Tales and True, and then yeah, that in time led on to me being approached about being on the TV show Australian Story, and yeah, it's really interesting because I don't watch very much television, but it was one of the only shows that I ever watched because they do such great stories and journalism. You know, they're very respectful, and so it just seemed perfect.
Mm-hmm. So what did it feel like the very first time when you're standing in front of 80 strangers and you're really bearing your soul, you know, one of the most traumatic moments in your life? What did that feel like to share?
Yeah, it was so interesting. I felt emotional and very, very vulnerable. It helped that they were strangers, except that
Yes.
two of my friends came. Two of my friends came who lived in Noosa, who were two of the few people who knew about the crisis, and they're a couple, and at one stage I looked up and he was crying, and that was challenging. I'm sure my voice quivered a bit then, but I felt like it was a good thing to do because I felt like it was a way that I could use something that had been so challenging in my life to help someone.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, obviously there were the people in the room, and I don't know who was in the room that night, but there were the people that heard it on the podcast subsequently, and you know, the ABC told me that, you know, they had feedback from people that it really helped. And you know, I know from my own experience, because I think my journey from that point to got, you know, I went into a massive growth period in my life and in the following few years. And I know for me, hope was a very significant thing in me changing my life. Having hope, knowing that it was possible to not feel the way I did, knowing that it was possible not to have a steady stream of unhelpful thoughts in my mind. That hope changed my life, and it felt good to be able to give hope to other
Yes,
people.
it's a double thing, isn't it? You finding your voice really saved you, but it's going to help other people. As somebody once told me that hope can stand for hold on, pain ends. And I just
Yes.
think that's beautiful. I'm like you, I'm a great hope believer. I think there's always hope. We always have the possibility to grow and change our mindset and become aware of what we're doing, you know, our negative patterns that hold us back. And gosh, what a journey you've been on.
Yeah.
What has been the kind of responses that you've got from people when they've heard your story?
So many people, you know, are grateful that that they get to hear it, grateful for the strategies that I share with people, grateful for the hope. A lot of people find it quite inspirational because when, you know, you've been to the point that, you know, it feels like there's no other option but to give up. And if you can come back from that, I think, you know, for most people, then they're not that deep down, if you know what I mean. So it makes it feel maybe even a bit more achievable. If you can come back from that, then there's hope that you can come back from lots of things.
Absolutely. So originally you didn't tell your boy because he was very little, but does he know now? He's older now.
Yeah, he's 10 now. And
when did you have that conversation?
Yeah, we had the conversation almost 3 years ago. He was 7 when Australian Story were going to film the episode. They wanted to include him in the footage because obviously he's a key part of my life. And then it comes back to what I said earlier. I only ever wanted him to hear the story from me, and I thought if it's on national television, there was always a risk that somebody might talk about it. And so I had a conversation with him about it then.
And did he understand? What did he make of it all?
Yeah, I think his understanding, his comprehension will, I'm sure, keep growing as he does. I kept the message pretty simple back then. I said, look, I had these very unhelpful thoughts in my head, stories that led me to thinking that was, something that was a solution to my problems, but it really wasn't. And, I'm hoping that what I've been through will help him to avoid that type of situation in his own life.
Well, you're really communicating about mental well-being, aren't you? Mental health. And if you can break the silence and the stigma and the shame for people, that's really going to make a huge difference, because so many people have found themselves in that situation, have felt suicidal or attempted suicide. I know that I have been one of those as well. So it is very shameful. So if you can take that away for people, that's really going to make a difference.
Yeah. It was funny. A few weeks after we had the conversation, we were at the shops and we were chatting about something, and maybe I was a bit frustrated about something, and then he said, "Oh, so is that why you jumped off a bridge, Mum?" I was just like, "Oh wow, okay. We need to keep having this conversation, obviously." But I know there was a time, I think his birthday last year, I was saying goodnight to him at the end of his day, and I looked at him, and then I just became overwhelmed with emotion, where it really hit me that I might not have ever had that opportunity. And I was just so incredibly grateful to be here and in his life. It was just amazing. It was like a damn wall coming down. I was just...
But it's layers, isn't it? The gratitude and the understanding. It's just layers and layers, and just working it at a different, deeper level all the time. And I saw from the show that you, I don't know if you still do, but at the time you volunteered for a helpline, for Lifeline.
Yeah. So I did that for 4.5 years, and what I look for other ways to support them now. So just this week, actually, on Monday, I spoke at one of their conferences, and I've done a bit of speaking for them, and they've used my story in their their end of financial year appeal, and so I've got a great relationship with them. But I figure that I want to reach lots of people, and the time on the phones is really one-to-one, and it's on the other side of town now as well. So but it was great.
Capacity if you speak out to reach more, one-to-many rather than one-to-one.
Yes, absolutely. That's how I feel, Madeline.
Yeah. So we're kind of nearing to the end, and I know that you have done a lot of work on practical advice and practical tips. Can you run through some of those for anyone that's listening that is struggling right now, or feeling that there's no way out, that there's no hope? What advice would you give to someone?
Yeah, look, my advice would be, if you're struggling, reach out to somebody. If you're feeling in turmoil, or you've got unhelpful thoughts in your head, just break that cycle and connect with somebody, because often we're creating these stories in our head. There is no fixed reality, and our brain just looks for evidence of whatever confirms what's in our mind.
Yes.
And often it's not other people's reality. So connect with somebody, find someone to talk to, look to get some professional help. I believe that we all have a birthright to feel well and to be fulfilled. And I think it's a matter of never stopping until you find what works for you.
Absolutely.
Because I think it's different for different people. You know, for some people it is, you know, seeing a psychiatrist and doing, you know, psychotherapy. But, you know, for some people it can be, you know, finding meditation and yoga. It can be a EFT, you know, emotional freedom technique tapping. I don't know if you've heard of that, but, you know,
Yes,
it's like
I'm
tapping.
tapping as well. And for you, you very
Yes,
much connected back with your body. You turned to meditation and you exercise
yes,
and you really, a lot of
yeah,
self-care really, I guess we could call it.
yes, yeah,
How did the
yeah.
people that are your nearest and dearest, how did they respond when you couldn't come to them? Because we see your sister, you know, saying that she could have come to me.
Yeah, yeah. Look, it was so difficult for my family. If I have one regret, it's that I put them through that. You know, I wouldn't change anything in my life because it's obviously made me who I am. But that was a very difficult time for my family, and you know, I think we all need to look out for our families and friends, and we need to build some skills around identifying if somebody's struggling and knowing what to ask them. You know, asking them, are they having any thoughts of ending their life? You know, I think that can be a scary question for people, but it actually saves people's lives. And um, I feel like if somebody had asked me that question, I probably would have said yes. You know, I'm not a very good liar. You know, I think it gives people permission to say, yeah, this is what's going on. I reached out to just one person in the world. He was a psychiatrist that I used to work with, or as in be treated by. And I said, look, I've got some crazy thoughts about ending my life, and the email bounced. Yeah,
Oh,
he changed his email
I
address.
didn't know that. Gosh, so
Yeah.
you think it would have made a difference? He would have got back in contact with you straight away?
Look, yeah, I would think so. I mean, it had been 6 years since I had actually worked with him, but I had worked with him for a few years. And, you know, now I have his personal number, you know, his mobile in my phone, but I've never had to use it. You know, I'm in a much better place than I've ever been in my life.
And I know
Yeah.
you have
So,
a little card that you've designed, haven't
yeah.
you? It's got some great practical tips. I don't know if people can
Yeah.
see that. If you can tell us
Yeah.
what's on the
I'll
card. When do you use this
Sure.
card? Give it out to people when you're
Yeah.
talking or when you're coaching or?
Yeah, so a bit of both. So mainly I'm doing speaking and training in mental health first aid and resilience training now. So when I speak in organisations or at conferences, I give all of the audience members one of these to take away. And these strategies absolutely changed my life. And, you know, they're not the only resilience strategies out there, but they're the first 6 that I found that really shifted me to a place of being well and fulfilled. And they're daily practices, really. So the first one is gratitude. Oh my gosh, gratitude changes what you see in the world.
Focusing on
So,
what you have rather than what you don't have.
yes,
Yeah.
there's some wonderful research that demonstrates the effectiveness of gratitude, you know, positive psychology. There's loads of studies that have confirmed this. But the practice I have that I want to share with everyone, it actually comes from the work of Pam Grout. She has a book called Thank and Grow Rich. Myself and 4 other people text 3 gratitudes to each other every day. Our
It's like
practice
a
has been
gratitude
going.
circle.
Yeah, it's like a little gratitude group. Yeah, yeah. And I think Pam Grout might call it her power posse. And our group has been going nearly 4 years, and what I love about the group setup is that you have accountability. They're expecting to get your gratitude. So they notice if your gratitudes don't come through for a few days. And the other one is that you get a reminder. So I used to write in a journal, but sometimes I would forget when other people's gratitude's coming through, like that's my trigger to do mine. And the third thing that I think is the biggest benefit of all is that you actually get to live their joy as well as your own. It's like vicariously living their joy. So not only are you aware of what's amazing in your own life or what you've got to be grateful for, but you get to live their joy. It's like a mega dose of
It's like the
gratitude.
ripple effects, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's totally amazing. But there's lots of different ways people can do gratitude. The next one, I'll go through them pretty quickly because I know we don't have a lot of time. But the next one is to just be still and connect with yourself, just being mindful. Having that, even if it's only 5 minutes a day where you just stop and you just focus on your breathing, it's amazing. It creates space in your mind. It creates a sense of calm, and then you could go on and have a meditation practice even, and there's lots of great apps around that can help with this sort of stuff now too. The next one is I call it creating your best year goals. So just thinking about what your best year would look like, and creating that picture in your head. If we were to meet in 12 months and you say, I've had my best year ever, what's happened? Who's there? What can you see? What can you hear? What can you smell? But most importantly, how do you feel?
Really using your creative imagination.
Yes. And I can't guarantee that you get all of them every time. Like I suggest putting 5 or 6 down, 5 and 6 outcomes, putting a picture next to them to remind you. But the way I see it is, you shoot for the moon and you land in the stars, you do pretty good.
This year might not look quite the same for lots of people, but hopefully
yes,
different. It's not going to stay like this forever.
No, it's not. And we can still, dream and have hope of what it is that we want, And sometimes I think too, what we want, and what actually transpires, like maybe sometimes it's not in the same packaging we expect it to be. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
The universe gives us what we want.
And everything. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, totally. So the next one is to do your thing. So I'm a cyclist. I love nothing more than going to ride my bike 60 or 80 kilometers and I feel alive.
Yes.
And I think everyone needs a thing, and for some people it might be dancing or jogging or restoring furniture or golf. And it's really that thing that gives you energy, and you've got a huge smile when you finish doing it, and 5 hours can feel like just 15 minutes. You lose track of time, and sometimes people don't know what it is, and I encourage those people to keep looking. And sometimes people do know, but they're not doing it, and you need to actually prioritize it, because when we get busy and we stop doing it is actually when we need it the most.
And it's going to look different for everybody, really, isn't it? Some people, it could be staying really still, or some people could be, as you say, dancing. For me, it's being out in nature, hiking.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely, yes. So the next one is to choose positive people. So just thinking, who you spend the most amount of time with. Jim Rohn said we're the average of the 5 people we spend the most amount of time with. So, do the people you hang out with, do they energize you? How do you feel after you spend time with them? Because we need to actually spend time with some people who build us up and help us feel good about ourselves and bring us energy as well. And we have a degree of control over that. And if we're caring for somebody who maybe has a mental illness, that makes it even more important. We need to make sure we're filling our cup to be able to support them as well.
Yeah,
and the final
it's interesting because that's something that a lot of my guests talk about. Look at who you surround yourself with. Who is in your circle. Are they bringing you down? Are they raising you up? So it's great to hear kind of common thoughts. It's brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. So the last strategy on that card is it's got an acronym HOPE, but it's help one person every day.
Oh, nice. I haven't heard that one before. I really like that. And then I guess that's
Beautiful.
about looking outside of yourself, isn't it?
Yes.
And looking at the bigger
Yeah.
picture. Yeah.
Yeah. When you're in a
So,
funk,
yeah.
when you're in a funk, one of the best ways to get out of it is to go and do something for someone else. And there's research that confirms this. There's a phenomenon called helper's high. We get all these happy hormones released into our brain, these chemicals. We get endorphins, we get serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, and it counters the effect of cortisol as well, that stress hormone. So, you know, if you want to be feeling good, go and do something for someone else. It can really lead to a big shift for you. And there's research that actually says when we do something for someone else, they're likely to pay it forward twice, which means
That's
ripple effect.
good. Absolutely. So help one person every day. I think that is just a beautiful place to end. So thank you so much for sharing our journey. I would absolutely say that you have had post-traumatic growth, that you have grown from this experience, and you can just see how much you are glowing and thriving after adversity. So I'm so grateful to you for taking time out and sharing your story with us today on Unbroken, the podcast. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you, Madeline. It's been an absolute pleasure. Lovely to meet you.
Unbroken, the podcast, with Madeline Black, playing now on all the main platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher for Android, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and here. Play Unbroken, the podcast, with Madeline Black.